It started with a telephone call from Eli Landau, who'd heard of my name through somebody called Bob Golston, who was head of business affairs at the AFT, at the American Film Theatre. And Eli flew over to London, interviewed me, and that seemed to go well. So I was asked to join the AFT.
I can't help wondering whether you miss it.
Only the sex and the violence. And these days, you can get those anywhere.
So the first two films I was asked to executive produce was Butley, written by Simon Gray, and The Homecoming, written by Pinter, both of which plays I'd actually seen in the theatre and loved. I liked the idea of those plays being transferred to film. So I happily accepted, and that's how it started. What dictates the quality of the film is the play itself. If the play lends itself to the screen, or the way we did it for the screen, then the play works perfectly on the screen. If the play had certain problems as a play, qua play, then it had problems vis-a-vis the film.
Don't talk to me about the pain of childbirth. I suffered the pain. I still got the pangs. When I give a little cough, my back collapses. And here I got a lazy, idle bugger of a brother who won't even get to work on time. The best chauffeur in the world. All his life he sat in the front seat giving lovely hand signals. You call that work? This man doesn't know his gearbox from his arse.
You go and ask my customers. I'm the only one they ever ask for.
What the other drivers do, sleep all day?
I can only drive one car. They can't all have me at the same time.
Anyone could have you at the same time. You'd bend over for $50 on Blackfriars Bridge.
Me?
For 2 bob and a toffee apple.
Odd enough, I saw The Homecoming, the film of The Homecoming. I ran it on tape the other day. I loved it just as much as I did when the first time I saw it. I think it holds up very well. It's of its time, of course, but that doesn't mean to say it's not timeless. And I think it is timeless. The play is, I think, Pinter's best play. The performances are absolutely first class throughout, from Paul Rogers down to the smallest part, Terence Rigby. You can't mistake any of the actors. They're absolutely in it. They have got their characters down to an absolute T, and the direction is impeccable. The way the camera is set up for the scenes seems to be absolutely right. And the trick on that is where you put the camera. And the relationship between characters in front of camera or behind the camera, the spatial relationship between front and back characters, is of the essence when you're doing a film. And I think both Peter Hall and Pinter did that superbly. So it gets the ensemble in frame. And the background is crystal sharp. So the relationship between the family is always there on the screen. I think we had talked about this. I mean, Peter Hall and Pinter and David Watkin and I met together, talked about the aesthetics of the lighting. And David came up with this quite extraordinary idea that everything should be absolutely in focus, with which everybody agreed. It was a question of getting it in focus. So, because of the lamp being there in the living room, David decided to make the lamp the centerpiece of the depth of field. And it was tough on the artist because it was so hot. So as soon as the take was over, we turned it off and cooled it down. But it was a nightmare.
Where'd you go to in Italy?
Venice?
Not dear old Venice, eh? That's funny. Do you know, I've always had the feeling that if I'd been a soldier in the last war, say in the Italian campaign, I'd have probably found myself in Venice. I've always had that feeling. The trouble was I was too young to serve, you see. I was only a child. I was too small. Otherwise, I've got a pretty shrewd idea I'd have probably gone through Venice. Yes, I'd almost certainly have gone through it with my battalion. Do you mind if I hold your hand?
I think that's the genius of Hall and Pinter and David. They were totally in sync in terms of what they were trying to do. And I think the film works beautifully as a result. It's dark, it's bare, it's nasty, it's very funny, it's deeply malevolent, but it's also deeply moving, I think, at the end. And the clarity of the film, through the clarity of the lighting and the performances, makes it very clear. I had never met Hal Pinter before The Homecoming. I'd met Peter Hall once before on a social occasion. But Hal was there throughout the shooting of The Homecoming and was very much involved in the way it was done, in the nicest possible way. I mean, Peter directed the film totally, but Hal was there to guide performances if necessary and to suggest and advise Peter on certain screen setups. But Peter had the ultimate choice, as a director must. And Hal would agree with Peter Hall's viewpoints most of the time. But I watched Pinter at work and was convinced that he would make a director. So it came a question of doing one more film for that particular season, and I suggested Hal Pinter doing Butley to Eli Landau. And Eli thought it was a good idea, sent Henry Weinstein over, again head of creative affairs of AFT, to talk to Pinter, and that's how Butley was done. In fact, what happened in the case of Butley was, once it was agreed that we would do it as a film, he sat back in his office in Regent's Park and broke down the play into scenes from which he hardly ever diverged. He's so meticulous and so painstaking, Pinter. He does his homework immaculately behind the scenes, so he was ready to go on the set on the first second when we started to shoot. He knew exactly where to put the camera. He thought it through in his own mind where to edit it and where to cut it. But he had experience before, through Joe Losey, basically, obviously, on the go-between and Accident. He had seen how films are done. So he learned a great deal, I think, from Joe Losey. I think, of course, the central performance of Butley is the central quality of the work. If there's no great Butley, the film collapses or the play collapses. And it was therefore important to capture Alan's performance, which was magnificent, both in the theatre and on film.
Tom? Tom and Reg? What on earth have Tom and Reg got to do with us?
He's asked me to marry him.
Which one? You're not. You can't be.
Yes, I am. Do you mind?
Yes, I mind very much. After all, a man is bound to be judged by his wife's husband.
It's a difficult part that Richard Callahan plays in Butley, because it has to be teased out of him what he is. And it's the silences that are important. When he looks and listens to what Alan is saying, that's what it's important in Richard's part. It's as important as what he says. The art of acting is the art of listening, actually. And both Bates and Richard are great listeners as actors. If you watch them closely in the cinema, you think you know what they're thinking. And that's a trick. It's an art, actually, that good actors have got. And both Alan Bates and Richard Callahan have that. So that central relationship works because they were two bloody good actors. And they played off each other beautifully, it seems to me.
I expect she became addicted, yes. She took up all my vices except smoking, drinking, and you. She never cared for you. Do you know that?
I had my suspicions. Thank you for confirming them.
She said that Tom became a school teacher because he had to prove, after 3 years of being taught by me at Cambridge, that education was still a serious affair. Whereas you wanted to get back to your old college here and with me because you were incapable of outgrowing your early influences, nursery dependence. This analysis was based crudely on the fact that you are homosexual. She also said that you were sly and pushing and that she didn't trust you an inch.
You never told me this before.
You never asked me before.
I didn't ask you now, either.
I know, but I got tired of waiting.
We had talks about who should play the English mistress, and it was Henry once again who came up with Jessica Tandy. I think partly it was a commercial reason. They wanted an American name, if possible, in the film. And the only American name that Henry could think of, who was a very talented actress and in fact was English, was Jessica Tandy. And when that idea was proposed to Pinter, he jumped at it. He thought it was a lovely idea.
Wouldn't it have been awful if someone had got in ahead of me? 20 years. I'm really rather ashamed.
Will you go on to someone else now?
I don't know. You know, last night I played a little game. I closed my eyes and I turned over whole groups of pages at a time, and then I looked at a page. It was in the commentary on a letter from his sad wife. And I remembered immediately when I started working on it. It was in Ursula's cottage in Ockham, Surrey. I can even remember the weather.
The intention of Eli and Edie was to film great plays. They had noble ambitions, the Landaus, so it was a question of the quality of the play. I think Henry Weinstein had seen the play in Celebration and loved it when it was done at the Royal Court Theatre, and probably suggested it to the Landaus, and probably said that if it's done as a film, Lindsay might be interested in directing it as a film, since he did the stage version, which is what happened.
To the finest mother and the finest dad that these three sons have ever had. To the finest mother and the finest dad.
The finest mother and the finest dad.
Hey, you don't say it, you daft nut.
What?
It's you we're toasting.
Oh, never lost the opportunity to take a glass.
He's right. I never have.
It was a kind of family doing In Celebration because they'd all been together before. Most of them had been together before in the play, and they loved the play. And the idea of Lindsay doing it as a film, I think, appealed to them enormously. So there was a kind of camaraderie amongst the actors and a sense of knowing the play backwards. It was also true of The Homecoming. And the more the actors knew the character, the easier it became for the director. And part of the camaraderie is part of the play of In Celebration. I mean, this is a family saga about the lack of love between mother and son, between mother and one particular son, or the perceived lack of affection between mother and son. And that was there in the play and is there in the film. And it's like the Berlin Ensemble. The longer you work together, the more you are a team. The same with In Celebration. They'd worked together in the past, loved the play, came back together again, and they were a team again. Lindsay was an extraordinary human being. Difficult, wonderful, lovable, but a joy to watch with actors. He was very much an actor's director. And he loved actors. He loved the play, he loved David's story. And when I use the word love, it really is a case of love in the case of Lindsay. When the idea came about that In Celebration would be filmed, I think they were both delighted because they wanted to immortalize the work. They were proud of what they had done, and rightly so, and here was a chance of doing it on celluloid. Limited scale maybe, but even so. Bates' summer is always in the background, even though Connie Chapman and Bill Owen might be talking, or Brian Cox may be talking, or Jimmy Bolan might be talking. Bates' presence is there, and you feel that in the film, that is hovering there somewhere. And that's the trick of a good director.
Andy.
Do you remember when I used to cry outside that door, let me in, let me in?
Oh, now.
Why wasn't it ever opened? Why?
Andy.
Why wasn't it ever opened, Steve?
Andy.
Why wasn't it ever opened, Steve?
But Alan Bates can transfer from cinema to stage quite easily. He had no problem whatever. But Brian Cox did. He had tremendous difficulty with In Celebration. He tried to give a theatrical performance, and it took a lot of Lindsay's patience to turn him down and give a cinematic performance. He's actually brilliant in the film. In his first film, actually. So not just his first film, but his first great success.
The funny thing is, he raised us to better things. But in his heart, my dad, he despises even more than Andrew. I mean, his work actually has significance for him. Well, the sort of work he's educated us to do is nothing but a pastime. A sort of soulless stirring of the pot. Good God. What hope have any of us got?
In the case of Galileo, Henry Weinstein, who was head of creative affairs for AFT, had always loved the play and was very keen to make it as a film. And it occurred to him that Joe Losey might be the ideal director to do it, because of course he'd done the stage version with Charles Lawton. So it made a lot of sense for Losey to be asked to do the film, he having done the play 2 decades ago in America. And Henry saw Joe Losey here in London, and Losey agreed to do it if they can get the rights. The rights were then bought, and Losey did the film. I had seen the stage version of Fiddler on the Roof, and of the choices presented to me as possible Galileos, and I can't remember the various possibilities. I can remember one, Richard Harris. I thought of them all, Topple was possibly the most appropriate. And I would phone up Topple's agent and ask him to come for a natter with Joe and myself, which is what happened, after which Joe felt very happy with Topple, after which he was cast. The nature of Homecoming, Battling and Celebration was claustrophobic. It took place in one room, or in a house, and it became, once you established that, it became, in a sense, easy. It's a question of which angle, which vantage point you select for the camera. Galileo was different, had 6 scenes in it, in different locations, and the trick was, because of budgetary constraints, we could only afford 1 set. And the genius of Richard MacDonald, who designed the set, was he did it in the round. So if you shot from one angle, it was 1 set, from another angle, another set, from another angle, another set. So there were 4 different sets, and by revamping the first 2, you got the other 2 scenes in it. So the set probably cost more on Galileo than the set of the other 3 films combined.
Aren't they out yet? Can't they reach a decision in this paltry matter? Christopher Clavier's Alton-Noe's astronomy after all these years? I hear this Mr. Galilei transfers mankind from the center of the universe to somewhere in the outskirts.
It was more difficult, I think, to cast than other films because it hadn't been done in the theatre. So it was all new to everybody. And Gielgud said yes. Once Gielgud said yes, other people came into it. Eddie Fox said yes. Michael Lonsdale said yes. Tom Conti's first film, he said yes instantly. Richard O said instantly yes. So it was a stellar cast. The thing behind this, the whole American film theatre, since it was done for very little money for all concerned, was once Kate Hepburn agreed to do Delicate Balance, lots of actors said if she's going to do it, then we'll do it too. She was the lead of the mob, so to speak. The actors got something between $25,000 and $50,000 per film, which was nothing in those days. It's even more than nothing now. But they got a small percentage, cost percentage in each of the films. So Hepburn did it for a small amount of money in return for a percentage, and others followed on from there. And the same with the directors. Again, I think they got $25,000. I can't remember the exact figure, plus a percentage, and they were very happy with that. Because who else would have thought of doing Butley as a film? Nobody. Or Homecoming as a film? Nobody. So in that sense, the American film theatre was an ideal framework for those 2 films.
There, is that what you wanted?
Oh.
Oh. Sorry.
Living theatre. Next time round in Polish.
I think artistically, the American film theatre achieved its ambitions. It turned good plays into excellent films. I think commercially it left something to be desired. We discovered that the audience simply wasn't big enough for that kind of experience. So at the end it didn't work. But during the 3 years that we worked on it, I think we all had a wonderful time, and I think we're all proud of it. I wouldn't like to differentiate between the various films. Some work better than others, but it's the quality of the plays that matter. If the play is X, then it works better as a film. If the play is Y, then it doesn't work as well. Those are 3 of my favorite films. I'm proud to have worked on each of them.
Shall we dance?
Honestly, I don't know what we're all coming to.
Salvation. I can feel it in my bones.
It achieved everything in terms of quality that it wanted to. Commercially, it wasn't a great success because we soon discovered that those people that have seen the plays don't want to see the films. And those people that haven't seen the plays, don't want to see the film either. So you're lost both ways. And odd enough, the biggest audience for those films was in major cities who have seen the plays and want to see it as a film, or some of them did. The first year wasn't unsuccessful, but by the end of the second year it became clear that there wasn't an audience for this kind of film, or not an audience sufficient to attract the budget that was needed. So it was a shame that it didn't work, but I think it was a considerable achievement on everybody's part, on Edie's part, on Eli's part, on everybody's part, on the director's part. I think we're all proud to have done what we did. Nothing to be ashamed of.